Hey everybody, it's Mr. Marshall at Stony Lane. I wanted to talk to you today because I know that your class is working on nonfiction reading right now, and so I wanted to work with you a little bit on that. So you ready? Here we go. So when you're a nonfiction reader, every nonfiction reader has something called expert topics. Those are topics that you just love reading nonfiction about because for some reason you just like them. Okay, and every nonfiction reader probably has two or three topics that they keep going back to and reading again and again. And anytime you get a chance to get your hands on a book or an article or a wiki on this topic, you go and you read it. And so I have a couple of topics like that in my life too. And one of my expert topics is U.S. presidents and U.S. history, especially the presidents. And um, so that's one of my topics. And whatever your topic is, it doesn't matter. Um, you probably have lots of strong ideas because you have experience reading that topic. Okay. So I have lots of ideas about presidents and, what they were like. And so, but what we do when we read our expert topic, because that can be a lot of fun, it can be really tempting to be like, yeah, I knew that. Yeah, I knew that. Yeah, I knew that. But what you want to always do when you're reading nonfiction, whether it's an expert topic or not, is you want to um, like kind of outgrow your thinking, have a new idea about a topic that you know a lot about already. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. All right, I'm going to show you how that goes. So I have one of my expert topics is presidents, right? Um, and so I have lots of ideas about all the different presidents that have ever been. Um, and so today I'm going to do some work with George Washington. So here's an idea that I have. It's not a revolutionary idea. Revolutionary, get it? Okay. So it's not like such a big idea, but George Washington was a great leader. Kind of like everybody knows that, even like a first grader knows that. So I want to try and grow that idea and make it into something a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some reading, but I'm not just going to be like reading everything. I'm going to be reading, looking for stuff about that. George Washington was a great leader. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and gather facts that'll push my thinking into kind of a new place. Okay, so let's do that. So I have been reading some books recently. This is one. This is another. I have some more. This is another. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read you a little bit from this book on the part about George Washington and see what we can find out. Ready? Here we go. Here's a picture of George Washington. I'm going to read you the words on the other side. It says he created the concept of a cabinet for his administration. With great foresight, he insisted on being a cabinet. So the words are right here. Maybe you've heard that. If you're not like this big expert on presidents, you know that a cabinet is sort of like a team he has, and they're all like good at stuff. Like, so there's the Secretary of State, there's the Secretary of Defense, there's a Secretary of like everything. And so he gathers like all these experts to help him make decisions because heck, even a president can't know everything, right? So I'm going to write here that he was the first one to create what's called a cabinet, or like his team to help him think about stuff so he can make good decisions. Okay. All right, let's keep going. It says, with great foresight, he insisted on being addressed as Mr. President rather than the other names that Congress wanted to call him, like His Highness the President. Yeah, because I think he really wanted to make sure that he would be different than a king, right? And so he wanted them calling him Mr. President because, kings were the ones that had all those fancy titles. And he didn't want to become a king because they had just gotten over having a king. They really didn't like having a king because the king was not good to them. So he didn't want to become a king, and he didn't want others to become a king either. All right, let's read a little bit more. Okay, there's one more part here. This is interesting. It says, It says that at the end of his second term, he declared he would not run for a third, stemming partly from the desire to retire and partly from the sense that his nascent, which is new, democracy he helped to create should have new leaders rather than risk the slightest lapsing. So there's a lot of big adult words there, but what it means is he said no third term because he didn't want to become a king. So I'm drawing a crown with like a line through it because he didn't want to become a king. Okay, so you see what I'm doing right now? I'm just like gathering facts about George Washington that help me think about the way he was a great leader. Because now I don't want to just think, oh, George Washington was a great leader. You know, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. So I want to think about something a little different about that. I'm going to push my thinking a little harder about that idea. Okay, so what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to think through these three facts that I just found, and I'm going to see kind of like what's the same about them, so that I can make my idea a little bit more kind of grown up. Okay, so let's see. Let's think about this idea about being called Mr. President, right? This idea about being called Mr. President was because he knew he didn't want people calling him fancy words, right? Because that's what kings do, right? Fancy titles like a king. He didn't want fancy titles like a king. And that's another thing he did is he didn't want to have a third term, right? Because he didn't want to be a king. He didn't want to be a king. So I'm going to push myself by just talking long about this. Ready? Let's talk about this. If you were with me, I would talk to you about it. But I'm going to just kind of think out loud right now because I'm by myself. So he didn't want to have fancy titles, and he didn't want to have he didn't want to be in power forever because he didn't want to be a king because he knew that kings were bad, right? Like they just had this horrible experience with King George III and all the kings before him. And he didn't want that. They fought, they risked their lives to get away from that, right? And so, but like they wanted him to be king. The Americans wanted him to be a king. Did you know that? They wanted him to be king. And like that must have been really like a weird feeling, right? Because like these people want me to be the king. Well, like that feels great, right? I can have all this power and everything, and so, but that didn't do it for him, right? He wanted something better. He wanted something. He wanted his country to be happy, right? Later, and so that means that he probably was. I'm going to write a word here. Was very humble. In a way, he was humble. Humble means that somebody is, even if they're really good and talented at something, they're kind of like, it's okay, it's not a big deal. All right, I'm good at this, but like, it's not a big deal. I'm just me, right? And so he was humble. So you see what I'm doing? You see how I took these two facts and I came up with the idea that he was humble. Now I'm going to kind of talk more about humble and the cabinet. Let's see if they go together. How how would the fact that he created a cabinet show that he's humble? Well, he needed their help, right? He needed their help. If he wasn't humble, he'd be like, I got this. I know how to do everything. I can make decisions about war and I can make decisions about money and I can make decisions about farming. But he didn't say that. He picked some of the best people in all those different areas to create the cabinet. So that kind of makes my idea stronger because now I'm seeing that in these three ways, he was humble. So I'm going to revise my idea. Ready? I'm going to change it. George Washington was a great leader, is what I had. So I'm going to change it to, let's take out the word great, and I'm going to revise it and say humble. George Washington was a humble leader because he knew that he didn't know everything. He didn't want to be called fancy names. He didn't want to be a king or be in charge forever because he knew that he's not the best, even though he was great. That's being humble. Do you see how I did that? Do you see how I kind of like took some facts about my expert topic? I took this idea that I had about my expert topic and I made it better by like kind of talking long about these facts that I found until I could come up with a better idea. Okay. So when you're reading about your expert topic, that's something you can do. You can do just what I just did right now. Okay. You can read in your expert topic about an idea that you have, find some facts, and talk about them until you're able to make a better idea by finding a pattern. Okay? Try it out. It might make you enjoy reading your expert topic even more because now that I think stuff like that, I love reading these things more and more. Okay? Try it out. Have a good time, and I'll see you again soon.